According to a study done by the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, bipolar disorder affects 1% of South Africans. Approximately 30% of those affected by this disorder will attempt suicide. Former SAFM presenter Karabo Kgoleng is one of them. Kgoleng survived a suicide attempt which led to her bipolar diagnosis. With, I believe it's bipolar.
Yeah, well, I'd had a couple of misdiagnoses, general anxiety and, depression when I was 15. And, I went through periods of ups and downs, moving around a lot and getting on medication, getting off medication, life changes. But essentially what led to the bipolar diagnosis after many years was after I survived a suicide attempt. And the psychiatrist did a whole battery of tests on me and, full-on interview. And then that's when they settled on that diagnosis. And it's been, I've had second and third and fourth opinions. So yeah, that's what it is.
Karabo, now I just want to focus on, you've worked at SAFM, now you're working here at Wits. My question is, what has it been like being with the condition and going to work? What sort of things did you encounter?
Well, the thing is with the radio job, especially radio, it's very, your adrenaline goes on and engagement with listeners and you're getting a lot of information. It's really, really, really exciting. Now, with a person with bipolar, because you go through manic phases that last for a long time, they're sustained before the depression crashes, is that it feeds that kind of energy. So it kind of feeds into the hype and then it creates a loop. So the excitement is there and you're keen to work, but then you'll work long hours. And of course, the nature of radio work, it's annual contracts. You can't if you take leave, it's no work, no pay. So it also puts a lot of pressure on you because you don't have a stable, predictable income. And unfortunately, mental illness is incredibly expensive to treat privately. And if you're using the state system essentially for your clinic meetings, clinic appointments once a month with a psychiatrist, basically you have to give the entire day to that. You get to the hospital at 6:30 in the morning and you wait your turn, and you can leave as late as 3 in the afternoon. If you're lucky, sometimes you have to come back the next day because the pharmacy closes at a certain time where they don't take new prescriptions. So you have to come back the next day and get your prescription. So it's really not easy. And what would have been ideal for me would be to also have that kind of support structure. Even in my life, if you've got a partner or somebody who can help you take care of sort of the basic needs, and you're not sort of, depending only on yourself, then it makes it easier to manage. So on the flip side, working in radio was amazing because it feeds the creativity, because there's a high level of creativity amongst people with bipolar disorder. We have a joke that goes like this, I hate having bipolar, it's awesome. Because you have those sustained levels of energy, you're full of ideas, you can go, and people wonder how you're doing it. And what they don't realize is that you actually have mania, which also means that you can behave in really erratic ways. You can be very impulsive, decide at like 10:30 at night when everybody's getting ready to go to bed that you want to go and party, or you go on a shopping spree, so sort of very impulsive behavior and stuff like that. And if people are not around you or you are not aware of your condition, then it can create havoc in your life. So specifically for people who work in media, who work in creative spaces, it is really, really lovely. But unfortunately, in order to manage the condition, you also need to have some kind of stability and routine in your life, which because I was working on my own and living on my own, I didn't really have that. So I was kind of, just burning, and I sort of burned for 7 glorious years and then crashed. So, but now, because I have a sort of stable working environment and I've got a full-time job, it's easier to manage. I've got, full cover medical aid. Like I mentioned, psychiatric conditions are incredibly expensive to treat. Just to give you numbers, psychiatrist first appointment, if you see a psychiatrist in private practice, just to get your full consult to check, everything, is just over 2,000 Rand. And then the follow-up appointment after 2 months is about 1,200, 1,500 rand. So if you're not fortunate enough to have medical aid that covers that, and then you have to apply for chronic healthcare benefits, medical benefits. And for each prescription, you'll pay a levy of about 150 bucks, and your medication will cost anything up to 1,000 to 1,500 rand a month. And then you must also go and see a therapist. So to see a psychologist every week, if you're lucky, a psychologist in private practice charges about between 450 and 750 rand for the hour, the session. So this is why you have this situation where, public spend on mental health is at shockingly low levels. There are very few mental health practitioners who work in the public sector. And then in the private sector, it's incredibly expensive. And then, to compound that, you have high levels of poverty, you have families that are fractured, we live under difficult circumstances. And then there's the stigma around the condition, where do you disclose to your employer, do you not disclose to your employer, especially if it tends to affect your performance if you're going through a particularly hard time. And also with bipolar, it's not like you put on the medication and you take one tablet of the same amount for the rest of your life. It's one of those things where you do keep having to go back to the psychiatrist, maybe if it's under control, like once every 6 months, to check that you're monitoring your levels, so it requires a lot of attention.
Johannesburg resident Chanel Sunkel, who suffers from paranoia schizophrenia, says her condition started as a teenager. Sunkel says she experienced stigma as her colleagues would avoid her. She says society has a perception that people with mental illness are useless and they cannot achieve anything.
I was pretty much a normal teenager, if you can put it that way. I finished my matric and I started working. And I then started to experience symptoms. In my teenage year, I used to be a very social person, and my very first symptom was actually to withdraw from everything and everyone. I became quiet, I didn't want to speak to anybody, I didn't want to mingle with anybody, and then slowly I experienced symptoms of hearing voices that were very critical, like telling me how bad I am, that I commit crimes, that I'm here for a purpose on earth. Some voices even said, I'm worthless, I must commit suicide. So it was very bad voices. It was either group, like a group of voices, people, or just a single voice. Then I also became extremely paranoid. I had this belief that people, especially my family, were in cahoots with the police and they're after me. Other things that I experienced was I couldn't look anybody in the eyes. To me it was like they can steal my soul out of my eyes if I look at them. So I avoided eye contact as well. As you can imagine, I started working, so my work deteriorated a lot. I was kind of living so much in my head that I couldn't concentrate on anything that was going on around myself. Eventually, after a couple of years, after when I started experiencing symptoms, actually, my boss was a medical doctor and she encouraged me to seek professional help. Of course, I was resistant because nobody wants to believe, people saying you're going to be crazy, you're mad and all that. But eventually I did go and I was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. I was put on medication. That was also quite a different and a difficult challenge, is because the medication, a lot of them had severe side effects, so I really struggled to get used to the medication. And in the beginning, for the first 9 years, the medications I was tried on didn't work. I kept deteriorating. Only after 9 years I was put on medication that actually worked up to now, that I've been stabilized on. But in the process, from going backwards, kind of deteriorating, I eventually lost my job. I lost everything, my flat, the works. I ended up in hospitals, psychiatric hospitals. I spent about altogether 4 years in psychiatric hospitals. I also spent 2 years in a psychosocial rehabilitation center. Because of the abuse at the time that I witnessed in hospital, that kind of, I know it's a bad thing, but in a good way, it actually encouraged me to say I'm going to fight this condition, and I'm going to fight for the rights of people with mental illness. That is pretty much how I ended up in this position and career that I'm in now.
How did your colleagues receive you?
I think at the beginning, we're talking about many years ago, so stigma was very different back then. For example, going to see a psychologist or psychiatrist was a huge shame. You don't share that kind of information. I wouldn't say I was really so much aggressive at work. I think my behavior was so dramatically changed and abnormal, if you can say that my colleagues did realize obviously something is not right. Funny, I would say most of their responses were more towards avoiding me, not talking to me, not coming close to me. I think in a way that they were scared, they didn't know how to deal with me. So that was a challenge, yeah.
And then what sort of support did you get?
At work at that time, many, many years ago, not much. I think we changed a lot in our approach of mental illness in the workplace, but back then I was actually medically boarded. So I was declared unfit to work, and that's when I went on to disability pension.